Hello and welcome to a new Age of Empires 2 build. A couple of months back I made this archery range from the game and wanted to make another building. In between two options I chose to build the stables. Let's go to the build. So I'm using the regular cardboard to make the basic shape of the stables building. After measuring the approximate dimensions of the building from the image, I cut off the sections that I need. Basically made two small houses and glued them to each other. After that I made some windows and a door for this using cardstock and copysters as usual. In the original image the windows and the door are open, showing some details inside. But working on interior details was not in my focus for this build, so instead I made the windows and the wooden door. So excuse my slacking. Using more cardboard I made shingles. Laid them on the roof with a bit of a randomness to make the paint job looking more interesting, at least in my opinion. After the roof work I made some styrofoam bricks. Started the brickwork with laying the corner pieces. This helps me align each layer or line of bricks so I don't end up with ascending or descending lines. Also, this method could be used to bring up the corners of the building if the actual brickwork anywhere other than the corners are smaller than the corner ones. Long sentence, again hard to describe. Then I laid the actual bricks. This time though, I'm keeping some space in between each brick horizontally and vertically. I'll get to that soon. Before I was done with the brickwork, I realized I forgot to add the extra shingles covering the top and sides of the roof. So I cut off some cardboard strips and glued them there. A while ago, I experimented on some mortar in between bricks effect. The reason I left spaces in between the bricks is to fill those with baking soda. With the help of a clean and soft brush, I distribute the baking soda evenly in between the gaps. Then with the help of a syringe, I apply watered down PVA glue over the filled areas. Or you can use a spray bottle to do the same. It's the first time I tried spraying technique and I think it's better and less messy compared to applying it with a syringe. While waiting for the building's PVA glue to dry, I started working on the wooden extension part of the building. I cut off copysters and made a platform with them. Then, in order to add legs to it, I drilled the corners and the sides with very different sized drilling bits. Copysters are not that durable and can't take much punishment when drilling. They end up getting split, so I had to go from thinner to thicker drilling bits. Using skewers, I started making the legs of it. You can see a split stir here. I didn't bother changing it as this will be covered up with more planks anyway. At this point I forgot that these sections needed to be leveled with the rest so I could add the planks. So I filled those with more stairs. Prepared the planks to cover the top surface. And then laid them up with a bit of a random approach. In the original image this looks like those were put there hastily or without any aesthetic care. After that I drilled some more pieces to go in between the legs to make the fences covering actually 1.5 sides of this part of the stables. This was also structurally speaking a beneficial addition since it helps keep the legs sturdier. Finally, I worked on to make an extension to this extension to make the ladders reaching up there. Tried to cut the stairs as thin as possible in order to create a scale appropriate final result. You can see the grout effect in between the bricks here. It looks messy still. Remember, this entire technique is still a work in progress that I will improve in the future. I also put together a random object that appears in the original image. I primed the stone parts in a dark gray and the rest with black. You can see the grout work after the first coat of paint. With all these shenanigans out of the way, I started the paint job. To be honest, I should have primed this in a much lighter tone of grey in order to bring the stonework better, or the groundwork better I suppose. But it is what it is at this point. I painted the entire building with various tones of diluted grey paint. I had to wait the paint to dry on the stonework since I applied diluted paint mixtures. It took a while. During this time I started painting the roof section. For this I applied a diluted mixture of black, red and orange-brown colors. And then applied various paints like orange-brown, a beige-like mixture, old wood, some cork brown and so on to differentiate the overall look of the shingles. And I had to cheat a bit with the paint job to cover the slacky work on the side and top shingles. I painted the same colors and painted black lines in between each section to make it look like shingles placed one after another. End result is questionable, to be honest. You can see how they look fake compared to the original shingles next to these. After that, to bind it all together, I applied a diluted black-red paint as a filter as usual. It dried fairly quickly and I continued working on the brickwork again. I painted the individual bricks with lighter tones of grey to make this look more saturated. I even applied some yellow into the grey mixtures occasionally to make it look warmer on some bricks. I saved the painting of the cornerstones to the last since I wanted them to have a uniform paint job. Once I was sure I'm done with the brick painting, I painted the wooden details with various wooden colors. Dry brushed the door and applied diluted black wash over them. Just like how I did with the roof, I applied a filter all over the stonework to both warm it up and bind them together. And I applied the dirt effect with weathering powders as usual. Next I started on the wooden extension part of the building. I painted all the planks with diluted wood grain. Then painted the stairs and stair extension with diluted orange brown. While waiting for those to dry, I started painting the roof planks. I used orange brown, old wood, chocolate brown and so on. Basically tried to make it look like each plank is from a different tree or aged or weathered differently. Painted the fences with orange brown and wood grain paints over a couple of coats. And applied some lighter paints to replicate some aging on their edges. The planks looked too new, so I dry brushed them with cork brown paint. Finally, I applied umber wash all over this section of the build. Originally, this build requires only 3 horses tied up in their stables, but I decided to have one leaving the stables with its rider on its back. I used a pair of Miniart's terrible or terrifying horses, and for the last one I used Zvezda's higher quality. They ended up looking okay. The Zvezda one with the rider looks good, but I had to work a lot to make the Miniart horses look decent. I also made some accessory items such as a pair of trout crates, barrels, chopped wood, some bales and a pair of pitchforks. Made a fence with a pair of horse saddles on top. Here's a close look at 1/7 scale chopping block and an axe, and the pitchfork. So for the base, I cut off an MDF board 20 by 20 centimeters in size, and cut off a foam core piece the same size. Glued them together with PVA glue. Painted it in black. Then with more PVA glue I applied the ground flock. Once it dried, I temporarily put the stables on the base to mark the outlines to guide me for grass application later. There's a path leading up to the door, so I laid some small and thin styrofoam bricks to represent this. Painted each with grey primer because it dries somewhat faster, and then touched the top parts with light grey paint. Applied diluted PVA glue around and in between the bricks to apply some more ground floor to bind them to the rest of the groundwork pattern. Did the same for the stone unit behind the stables. Then applied the first layer of grass. After it dried, I applied a second darker tone of grass. With everything done, it's time to put them all together. This is always the most satisfying part for me, as I start seeing the final result of every bit and piece coming together. I almost forgot that this had a vine-like detail growing upwards from the ground, so I rolled up some dry grass-like flock and glued it on the building. Also added the green flock that I usually use for my trees around and over the previous one. With the same flock, I added a bit of a horse feed or dry grass kind of effect right under these stairs. Added more flock here and there to both cover up gaps and prettify this in general. Added the hay bales, a pitchfork and the crates on the top side. Added another pitchfork by the stairs, and as I tried to stay loyal to my reference image, I added a pair of barrels right next to it. Took the creative liberty and added the wood chopping block and the chopped wood to make the scene more lively. Added a small crate and a barrel to the side of the building. And finally added the last horse with the crossbowman on its back on the base. And called this piece done. Thank you for being here and watching this episode. This had been the fourth Age of Empires 2 build for me and had been a fun and rather fast build. If you want to see more Age of Empires 2 builds in the future, let me know in the comments, and feel free to include your building ideas or requests. Well, at least stuff that won't take an entire table when finished. Thank you again for being here, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye bye.